With respect to the work that you've all been doing, just last week, FEMA released a 2013 National Preparedness Report, which did identify the need to mature the role of the public-private partnerships as a new national area for improvement. And this was also highlighted during our Twitter chat last week. And based on the incredible work that your companies are doing, what has your actual interaction been with federal, state, and local governments? And has FEMA reached out to you all specifically, and have you worked with FEMA? And I'll, ask Mr. Stepka and Payne specifically initially, because I'm sure you have worked with them, Mr. Cardenas.
Yeah.
Or yes.
Yes, we have worked with FEMA, and we talked to them about how we can better work together to help support their efforts. So I think I'd like to do that more as well. I think at every level of government we've been working at different situations. I mentioned we worked with the City of New York as well in a crisis. I think we look for scalable ways to reach out to government organizations. It's hard to reach out to all of them, so I think it's important, again, go back to standards. If we have standards laid out, that it doesn't require that we have relationships with every single organization, every level of government. If we all can agree on certain kinds of interacting with secure data, that'll take care of a lot of those interactions.
I think this relationship highlights the importance of open data. FEMA does a great job with certain data sources that they can publicly release, making them available so that organizations like Google, ourselves, and other response organizations can leverage that information. We would certainly welcome the opportunity to engage them to see on both sides how we could improve that relationship. During Hurricane Sandy, we did work with the Office of Executive Management at New York City. I think they did a fantastic job interfacing with dozens of organizations to help as much as possible, and I think that was a success story of a governmental social sector interaction. And it's something that we take a very strong commitment to openness at Palantir Technologies, and with all the work we've done, be it a flood or tornado or a hurricane, have ensured that all the data that was generated by mobile devices, integrated, et cetera, was made available to relevant authorities to ensure that they had access to all that information that they, other than the personally identifiable information that was removed.
Thank you. I would ask the ranking member, gentleman from New Jersey, for any further questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cardenas, I've had a great deal of interest in smart grid technology and have had conversations with your company officials as well in reference to it. And in your testimony, you explained that smart grid technology enables utility companies to pinpoint problems and restore service more quickly. How does the smart grid technology differ from 20th century technology?
Well, equipment in a smart network and talks to the components of that system. It can reconfigure automatically the way a neighborhood is fed. It relies not on human beings doing individual steps. Information between these components can automatically restore services in many cases. In addition to that, it provides efficiencies with the setting up of a circuit you're going to work on remotely so that you don't have to send people to each piece of equipment and put it in a way that people can work on it. For instance, we had 4,000 people who came to help us out, and we had to, every morning, send them out to do work. It took us a long time to allow them to be able to do the work because we had to make it safe. With a smart grid, with a supervisory control and information system, we could do that remotely and gain efficiencies in the actual time and leveraging that resource to get the restoration done. So a smart grid is quantum leaps ahead of what we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's now the way we go, and it's where we are hoping to make very large investments in.
So that's basically how the smart grid technology would improve responses during disasters.
It will do it both ways. It will do it with the efficiency of the people working to restore service, as well as the automated restoration associated with reconfiguring the way the grid is fed.
Thank you. And Mr. Stepka, in your testimony, you note that, an affordable high-speed internet access, is necessary to be tech-ready for disasters. Nearly 100 million Americans do not have access to broadband, and 1/3 do not have access to internet. And, I discussed that a bit yesterday when we were in my office. So from your perspective, how does the digital divide undermine disaster response efforts, and how would you address the problem?
I think it's a very important issue. I think it's, in addition to crisis response, we also work on this issue in general, trying to provide better internet access to people around the world, actually. As you know, we've launched an effort to bring high-speed internet access starting in Kansas City, Austin, and Provo. And I think the idea being is, in general, this is very important. Obviously, we need to have a way to provide internet access to everybody, as well as high-speed access in their home. I think so that everybody has access to these great tools and lots of things, the advantages of being connected, not just in a crisis. I think it's a challenge which we're doing in general, and we're focusing on a lot of resources on. There are a couple challenges which are different. One challenge is in urban environments versus rural environments. And rural environments are very hard to reach using fiber, for example. And usually a wireless technology is probably more efficient. So we've experimented working with the FCC on a different technology which provides potentially the ability to provide access to people using the TV white spaces, which is a low frequency bandwidth that can be used to reach rural parts of the world.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I yield back the balance, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their testimony.
Thank you. I have a question, Mr. Beckerman, to start with you, and others might want to chime in. But what are, in following up, what are some things that the federal government should do in forming partnerships with the private sector to take advantage of the new technologies? And I might ask whether or not you're aware you represent a number of associations, or I'm sorry, a number of companies, and incredibly innovative companies. Are there any new technologies we can be anticipating that can be used that you can talk with us with respect to social media for emergency and disasters? But how can we better connect up the federal government with these new technologies?
Well, I'd say this hearing today is a great start, opening the dialogue. So, thank you for having the hearing. The most important thing is for private sector, our companies, and the federal government to have an open dialogue and talk. The technology is evolving, and as we go through each one of these unfortunate situations, lessons are learned, and the federal government gets better, and our companies get better, and the public gets better at understanding how to use the technology. Crowdsourcing is a very powerful tool, both during a disaster to help bring volunteers and after a disaster to help bring money and volunteers and rebuild. And so, we just ask that the federal government, and they've been doing a great job so far, is keep an open dialogue with our companies and share data where they can, and we'll educate the public on how they can use this technology.
Do you believe that the federal government is improving its use of social media for emergency alerts and preparedness, or what is your opinion on that?
Absolutely. It's improving every time, and as we've seen from some of the protocols from FEMA, they're already using social media to send out alerts telling people to either shelter in place or evacuate, and that's a great step.
Any others on the panel who'd like to comment on about how we, work even better together and any emerging technologies?
I would echo everything you said as well. I think it's very helpful to work collaboratively on these ideas. The technology is still evolving. I think it's still early days in some ways. I think working together on open formats for data to be shared in a secure way that's appropriate, using crowdsourcing in the appropriate way as well is a very important thing in this context. I think there's been a lot of good progress to date. I'm actually very encouraged by, as I mentioned, what the White House said recently on data standards, and I think that those general movements are all in the right direction.
Okay. Mr. Payne?
To echo the other panelists, I concur that we are moving in the right direction. I'm heartened by many of the open data initiatives and open data standards. The White House CTO has done a fantastic job pushing new standards that make computer comprehensible formats the norm. One good example I'll offer of this is nonprofit data. Today, nonprofit data is publicly available, but as a scanned piece of paper that a computer cannot read very well. And it takes hundreds of thousands of man-hours to rewrite the database that exists with information that is supposed to be public data. And so in the new budget proposal is the ability for that to be electronic information, and thus much, much easier for technological organizations to leverage that data. There are 1.4 million nonprofit organizations in America today, and having the ability to engage them in a disaster or an emergency would have a lot of benefit to those on the ground, and that open data could go a long way towards that engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Any thoughts you might have?
I'll give you one example of the collaboration and how we're going to be able to help. In the not very distant future, I can see a first responder from a municipality going out with a phone, taking a picture, sending that to us. It'll be able to tell us what equipment is at that location the picture was taken from, and then take action on that. The collaboration between the utility and the way it formats its information and its ability to speak and connect with that device will be critical as we move forward into the future, where whether it be crowdsourcing or just the use of these devices to locate and identify equipment that's been damaged is going to continue to be critical. That I'm hoping I'll be able to see in the next 9 to 12 months.
Thank you. Thank you very much.